All right, so it's another day here in the United States of America, which apparently means that we are going to be suffering from another tragic mass shooting. This one took place down in Allen, Texas, outside of a mall, in which 8 people were killed and multiple others were wounded. So I got a lot to get into in this video, as you can see here from the top, but I want to just get into the full breadth of this entire conversation because we had some complications with some of the information that was coming out. A lot of conservatives who were confused about who exactly the shooter was, what exactly their motivations were, what groups they may or may not have had ties to. So I want to get to all of that. But first, here from CNN, just to start off with some of the basic facts in terms of what we actually know right now. So they say what we know so far about the massacre at a Texas outlet mall. More than a dozen victims, at least 8 people were killed and 7 more wounded in the massacre. Local officials said victims ranged in age from 5 to 61 years old. 5-year-old children just getting killed here in the United States on a regular basis. In fact, if you look at the statistics, death by firearms is the #1 cause of death for children in the United States of America. Okay, that's the reality that we are deciding to live with and apparently be comfortable with. So they say that's according to a Dallas area medical group. And a father who rushed to be with his son at the mall described the horror that awaited there, and I'm going to get to that testimony here in a second. They say that police killed the gunman, saying an officer was already at the mall for an unrelated call when the gunfire broke out. The Allen police chief said Saturday, and the officer followed the sound of the gunshots, tracked down the shooter, and killed him, according to the chief. So at least he wasn't acting like the Uvalde police that we saw back during that mass shooting at the elementary school. But, again, it shouldn't even be a situation where the police are having to run towards the sound of gunfire to kill somebody who's carrying a military-grade assault weapon and just massacring people, because it doesn't matter. You could have a police officer who is on the scene, responds immediately, which it appears like is exactly what happened in this situation, and yet we still have 8 dead people, including children, on our hands. Okay, so, at the end of the day, if you're going to allow people to have guns like an AR-15, it doesn't matter how quickly you respond to it. It doesn't matter how many people are armed with guns around the area. Okay, they're going to be able to kill a large amount of people in a short amount of time, because that's exactly what these guns are designed to do. But they continue, saying the shooter's background. The gunman, who dressed in tactical gear, has been identified as 33-year-old Mauricio Garcia, a senior law enforcement source told CNN. They say Garcia had been living in some kind of temporary housing in the Dallas area, the source said. He used to work as a security guard and had received firearms training in that role, according to an official database. The weapons, so the shooter was armed with an AR-15 style assault rifle, right? Somehow we have these conversations where people are like, okay, if you ban AR-15s, it's not going to solve mass shootings, and yet we still have, in virtually every single circumstance during these kinds of mass shootings, it's an AR-15 that is being used. Now, again, you could ban them, and that probably wouldn't stop shootings from happening in the United States. Of course it wouldn't. You could still have handguns, you could still have a multitude of other weapons, but it may save some people's lives, because some of those weapons are harder to kill mass amounts of people in a short period of time. An AR-15 is a military-grade assault weapon that is designed to tear human bodies apart. Okay, it's not a hunting rifle. It's not even something that would be the most effective in a home defense type of situation. It's just not something that average civilians need to be able to get their hands on with this kind of ease. And again, it seems like we see these in every single mass shooting, but they continue saying that the potential extremist ties, okay, so here's where we get to some of the confusion on the part of conservatives, which honestly, in my opinion, seems like intentional confusion, but they say that authorities are investigating whether the shooter was motivated by right-wing extremism. A senior law enforcement source said authorities have not zeroed in on a specific motive, but the source said that the shooter was found with an insignia on his clothing that read RWDS, an acronym known to watch groups, potentially standing for Right-Wing Death Squad. It's a mystery what his political affiliations could have possibly been, right? Literally wearing a right-wing death squad patch on him when he committed this tragedy, right? They say he also had extensive social media presence that included neo-Nazi and white supremacist related posts, according to the official, and I'll show you some of those here in a minute. And they finish off here saying that we are still waiting basically for some more details. Okay, so we are still waiting for some details. We can't 100% make a connection between their political ideology and, this kind of a shooting that took place, but it's pretty much there. I mean, it's all laid out. It's very clear. He basically outlined it all online. Okay, so we're going to get to a lot of that here in a second, but just to start us off here, we have the Washington Post. They say Texas gunmen fantasized over race wars on social media before the mass shooting. So they say the gunman who killed 8 people at an outlet mall in suburban Dallas posted photographs of the shopping center 3 weeks before the attack on social media, where he fantasized about race wars and the collapse of society. They say the social media posts, the last of which went online Saturday shortly before he stormed into the shopping mall, included violent, hateful references that included singling out Asians with slurs. And they say Mauricio Garcia, age 33, also used his account on, I'm going to absolutely butcher this name, but it's basically a Russian social media platform, I think the second largest one in Russia, but they say to reference the noble war, a phrase that many white supremacists use to describe their belief in an impending race war. And tragically, it seems like he obviously had some sort of a bent towards Asian Americans here in the United States, and you look at some of the victims here, one of them was almost an entire family of Korean Americans who were killed in this mass shooting. The only survivor was a 6-year-old in this family. Okay, so again, just absolutely fucking tragic. But so that it looks like, just based on this preliminary information that we got, that this guy obviously has ties to white supremacy, right? He obviously is at least a white supremacist sympathizer. He's been involved in different social media groups. He's been posting online, and as you're going to see here, he also has some tattoos that are questionable, to say the least. Okay, so in my mind, at least, that seems like pretty firm evidence that we have in terms of his political affiliations, potential motivations for this shooting that took place, but we'll get to a little bit more of that just to solidify it here in a second. Before that, I just want to get to some actual testimony here from some people who witnessed what happened on the ground, because again, obviously this isn't just about talking about the shooter, their motivations, their political affiliations, but it's also obviously just about the human tragedy of this kind of a situation. So they say here from NBC, mall shooting witness, the injuries were so severe that there was nothing I could do. So they say when a gunman stepped out of a sedan and opened fire on shoppers at Allen Premium Outlets on Saturday, people ran away in the parking lot while those inside scattered and took cover. Stephen Spainhauer's son worked at the shopping center and called him when he couldn't get through to 911. Spainhauer was nearby and rushed to the scene, arriving before police. He said he went to perform CPR on victims and helped find rides to the hospital, but for some others, there was little that he could do, saying again, the injuries were so severe that there was nothing that I could do. His description of the scene is heartbreaking. Spainhauer recounted finding a girl near the bushes, and again, warning, this is pretty, graphic description here, but they say that he recounts finding a girl near the bushes in a praying position and reached down to check her pulse. When he turned her over, she had no face. Okay, that's what we're dealing with here. Okay, a small child that he goes and finds her laying in the bushes, hoping that maybe there's something salvageable there, and he turns her over, and her face has just been blasted off by this lone gunman. Okay, and again, as they're going to get to here, it's not even just about, obviously, the victims and their families and all of that stuff. It's also about, like, even just having to witness something like that, right? I saw videos online on Twitter of the aftermath of this when they're trying to evacuate people, and you have like hundreds of people who are having to be evacuated from this mall, right? Not knowing what's going on, not knowing if potentially one of their family members or somebody they know or one of their friends has been killed in this mass shooting, and they're having to go with their hands on their heads, being escorted by fully armed and kitted out police officers to evacuate the mall. I mean, this is all just traumatic as fuck, and this is happening on a regular basis here in the United States. Okay, this is just what we've accepted as normal at this point, right? Okay, this is what some conservatives call freedom here in the United States. Okay, it's freedom when somebody is able to easily get access to an AR-15 and commit this kind of a massacre, okay? But it wouldn't be freedom if, what? We took the same track as many other countries around the world who don't seem to have these same mass shootings in their countries. I mean, we're the only country on the face of the planet that has these kinds of mass shootings on a regular basis like we do. I mean, you look at a country like Canada, this doesn't happen in Canada, right? That's right on our northern border. You can't make arguments that, oh, this is just about mental mental health, or, oh, this is just about violence in movies or video games or some other thing like that. Okay, clearly there's a difference between us and all of these other countries, and it is the proliferation and the ease of access to high capacity and military grade weapons in this country. I mean, it doesn't really get much more simple than that, right? You couldn't really get a more, a coherent analysis than that. There's one variable, there's one factor that stands between us and the rest of these countries, and it is that we have so many fucking guns in this country. Okay, but he continues here. He says, I found a 4-year-old under a lady. Got the 4-year-old, 5-year-old around the corner. He said he was okay. He was covered in blood from head to toe. There wasn't anything I could do. They say that Spainhauer's son sheltered inside the H&M store with fellow employees and shoppers. Father and son reunited when authorities began evacuating the mall, so at least it looks like this guy's son was okay. But he says, my son came out, and I want to tell you, to see your son come out with his hands over his head and have to walk past dead bodies, it's not something any parent or anybody should ever have to see or experience. And again, it's this traumatic thing that we are all experiencing as a country on a weekly or in some cases a daily basis in the US. Okay, we are having to deal with this. The people who are involved in this are having to go through this traumatic experience of seeing people lying dead on the ground. I mean, this guy, he's just some average dad who just happened to show up on the scene and is now having to like comb through dead bodies on a scene. I mean, it's just absolutely grotesque that we allow this to continue. And yet, is there a conversation about actual solutions in terms of how we could prevent this from happening in the future? No, there is not. In fact, we have people like Megyn Kelly who want to basically just brush all of this aside and sort of scoff at the idea that we would even have a conversation about the proliferation of guns in this country. So let's go ahead and hear what Megyn Kelly has to say here.
What's going on?
So in my career now, I'm going on 20 years in our business, and I've covered more of these mass shootings than I ever wanted to. And I am sick and tired of opening up the papers or the phone and the Twitter, whatever, and just seeing the entire aftermath get mired in the gun debate, which is lost. It's over. The pro-gun control people have lost, and they don't realize it, and they get us stuck every time arguing over something that's never going to happen.
Okay, so there you go. She's seemingly more frustrated by the fact that people keep bringing up gun control, common sense gun legislation, than she is upset about the actual shooting itself. I mean, what exactly is your proposal here that we do about this situation? Are you just going to say mental health? Okay, as you continue to defend the Republicans in this country, the conservatives in this country that vote against expansions of mental health care every single time that comes before Congress? I mean, what are you going to bring up? If it's not the guns, then what is it? And also, another part of that is that if you look at the actual data, the polling data, in terms of Americans' approval of some common sense gun legislation, depending on which specific policy initiative you're looking at, we're talking about policies that are supported by like 60%, 70%, 80%, in some cases 90% of the American people. So why can't it get done here in the United States? Well, could it be that we have many lawmakers who are sort of either in the pocket of organizations like the NRA that dump hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into their campaign coffers? Or on top of that, it could also be that they feel a lot of pressure from the media ecosystem on the right-wing sphere, or that they feel a lot of pressure from the more like rabid aspects of their base of supporters within the Republican Party. I mean, this is not something that should be difficult to do, and yet she's turning around and saying it's impossible. Okay, the gun control debate has been lost. It's been lost how exactly? Because the American people are firmly in favor of common sense gun legislation, okay? Now, I'm not even completely anti-gun, right? I mean, I've talked about this on this channel. I've shot guns before, right? I think in some cases, guns can be kind of fun to shoot, right? But there are certain types of weapons, right? There are certain policies we could put in place to make sure that somebody isn't immediately, when they're in the middle of a mental episode, getting to go out and buy a gun or stockpile mass amounts of ammunition, stockpile large amounts of guns or military-grade assault rifles like an AR-15, which again, no civilian needs to have for any justifiable reason whatsoever. There are just like certain things that we could do to make the issue marginally better. Is it going to solve 100% of the problems? No, but it would be a good step in the right direction, and it would save lives and potentially prevent some, if not all, of these kinds of tragedies. But she's just throwing her hands up in the air and saying we should just give up and not talk about the guns. I mean, what do you expect that we're going to talk about here? Because again, if the argument is that it's just mental health, health. Well, how come, all of these other countries around the world, whether that's Canada, whether that's France, whether that's Germany, they all also have similar rates of mental health issues within their countries. They don't have similar rates of mass shootings within their countries. What is the X factor there? What is the main, variable that pops out in this equation? I mean, it's not that fucking complicated, and yet this is all we get. So here again, from the governor himself of Texas, Greg Abbott, he has some thoughts on this as well. He, again, is going to be talking about the issue of mental health, and they're going to do a little compilation here from the recount where they're giving examples of some of the previous times that he has talked about mental health and that needing to be a priority, and then contrast that with the actual statistics on this issue within Texas. So let's go ahead and watch this clip.
We are working to address that anger and violence by going to its root cause, which is addressing the mental health problems behind it.
We as a state, we as a society, need to do a better job with mental health.
It also means providing resources to address the mental health issues behind gun violence. We all know that this is something that we must address as a nation, but also as a state, and that is for all of us to do a better job to address mental health issues.
In 2021, Texas ranked last out of all 50 states for access to mental health care, according to the State of Mental Health in America report. Last year, Governor Abbott cut more than $200 million from the department that oversees mental health programs in Texas.
Okay, so there you have it. The guy who has been talking since 2017, I think was the last clip here after the Sutherland Springs shooting. Since 2017. This guy's been in power for years at this point, okay? Same shit on repeat. Let's not talk about the guns, let's talk about mental health. Okay, now listen, if you were to sit down in a good faith way across the table from some leftist who wants to see less mass shootings, and you said let's seriously invest in mental health in this country, they would absolutely be in favor of it, okay? You're talking to people like me who are in favor of universal healthcare, who are in favor of Medicare for all, so that cost is not a barrier to get access to healthcare, whether that's mental healthcare, whether that's addiction services, whether that's any form of healthcare, right? You want to have a conversation about expanding access to mental healthcare, I'm all here for it. But then the reality of it is exactly what they said there at the end, right? They are not interested in actually expanding access to mental health care, okay? $200 million in the last yearly budget slashed from the oversight program that tackles mental health within Texas, ranking last in the country, 50 out of 50 in the entire United States of America. We're talking about the second largest state by population in the country. They rank last in access to mental health care, okay? And we are supposed to, expect that this guy is being serious about addressing mental health care as an issue, and that, he's so focused on that and he's taking that issue seriously, and that's all we need to focus on instead of about gun reform legislation. I mean, it's completely ridiculous at face value. So with that being laid out there, now I want to get to a little bit more information on the actual shooter, because apparently, again, there was a little bit of confusion surrounding this, right? So we've tackled sort of the basic facts of what we know. It seems like it's 100% certain that this guy has white supremacist ties. You're going to see a lot of that here in this thread. We covered some of the typical responses that we got from conservatives every single time a mass shooting like this happens, but now it seems like it's going even farther than that, because now we have conservatives who are basically trying to imply that this was some sort of a psyop, or that there's some sort of a, conspiracy going on with this shooting and the attribution of the political ideology to a right-wing sense on this shooter. So here from Eric Toller, who is from Bellingcat. Now listen, Bellingcat, typically if it was something on foreign policy issues, I would have a lot of skepticism when, tackling this. And of course on this, I also have skepticism, but it seems like a lot of this has been verified and is tracking very well in terms of being actual verified fact on this. So here's a thread from this guy from Bellingcat. Bellingcat has ties, obviously, to the CIA, to the State Department, but this is what he has to say, okay? So just some of the basics about this shooter as of what we know so far. So first off, this is his YouTube account. Is anything standing out to you about the profile picture on this YouTube account? Okay, it gets worse. They say here, flashback to I Write OK's 2019 Bellingcat article on how mass shootings have been gamified, with the Texas Allen shooter talking about a decent kill score in the Nashville shooting that recently took place. Again, as they pointed out there from the police initially, the RWDS patch. Okay, so that was something that the police reported that he was wearing at the time of the shooting. This is one of the pictures that he posted on one of these social media sites. You can see there the RWDS patch next to a Texas flag with a skull on it, and next to a regular skull flag there as well. Okay, we have a bunch of other things. Oh, I wonder if this could maybe clarify some of the political inclinations of the Texas shooter. The guy with an SS tattoo, and a swastika. I wonder what this guy's motivations may have been, okay, as he was posting on social media shit like this alongside, plans to actually go up and shoot up this mall. He had pictures of ammunition that he was posting on the social media sites. He had pictures of the peak times, as you can see here, from the mall, the Allen Premium outlets that he was posting and saying, this is when it gets as busy as it is during the day. This is when I can kill as many people as possible, I guess. Okay, again, you see the patch down there. I mean, we have so many different things that we could point to here. Pictures of guns, again, pictures of ammunitions, pictures glorifying Nazis once again, okay? Again, his YouTube account there. And we also have shit like this, right? Where he's basically insinuating that, I guess, Latino Americans have two different pathways where they can act black or become a white supremacist. I guess clearly we know which of these two that he decided to choose, but believe it or not, there is a third choice there where you could just be like a normal human being and not commit massacres, not become a white supremacist or try to be something that you're not. I mean, it's just a ridiculous mindset, a disturbed and deranged mindset that this guy put himself in. Again, very up in the air what exactly this guy's ideology may have been here, okay? They also add down here, one last thing, as noted by Jake Godin, the Allen shooter was apparently a big fan of libs of TikTok and signed off on one of his posts with Heil Hitler. Okay, now apparently there were other reports, as they pointed out up towards the beginning of this, where he was posting screenshots of like Tim Pool's show and stuff like that. So apparently he's a big fan of Tim Pool, libs of TikTok. Maybe you should do a little bit of sort of like internal analysis on your own political ideology when this is the kind of guy who apparently is a big fan of your show. Okay, so with that being laid out there, right, we've seen what his YouTube looks like. We've seen some of the verified things from the police with the RWDS, the right-wing death squad patch that he was wearing during this shooting. It seems like it is unambiguously clear exactly what this guy's political affiliations were and potentially what the motivation was for this shooting. And yet we have conservatives here who are basically spinning themselves in circles, trying to act as if this is a super confusing and I guess controversial and conspiratorial situation. Even Elon Musk himself, okay? Elon Musk himself, the most followed man on this website, the owner of Twitter.com, okay, who has been running this site into the ground with all of his terrible policy decisions at Twitter, okay, and he apparently says this gets weirder by the moment, and he's responding to somebody who is saying it's a psyop and it's not even good, who is quote tweeting Ian Miles Chong, who is one of the most deranged right-wing freaks on Twitter. Okay, so these are first of all, these are the kinds of people that Elon Musk is in bed with and thinks are like credible sources, I guess. So that should give you a little indication about where Elon Musk is right now in terms of his political affiliations, right? He's come out and said, oh, I'm just a centrist, right? People are trying to say that I'm right-wing. I'm not right-wing. I'm just defending Nazis, I guess, in this kind of a circumstance, or at least shedding doubt with no actual evidence whatsoever that this guy was potentially motivated by his right-wing beliefs. I mean, again, here's another one. And I don't even know who this person is. The red-headed libertarian, like, I guess she works for Timcast, and this is who Elon Musk is responding to. I mean, she's posting things about here, how this is a psyop, right? And how people are doing mental gymnastics to justify how this isn't a psyop. I mean, we're just looking at the evidence, right? But Elon Musk, he comes out and he says, didn't this story come from Bellingcat? Well, no, first of all, some of those details that I just showed you came from one reporter at Bellingcat who provided verification as to how he came to those conclusions, which you could disagree with if you want to give a detailed breakdown in terms of why you have doubts about those specifics within that breakdown that he put out there. But it wasn't just Bellingcat or that one reporter. It was also the police who, again, said that he was wearing a right-wing death squad patch on his chest and almost immediately started investigating his right-wing ties online, right? And he says, oh, it was reported by Bellingcat, which specializes in psyops, basically. I don't want to hurt feelings, but this is either the weirdest story ever or a very bad psyop. First of all, why is this the weirdest story ever? Because what? It was a Hispanic guy who potentially, had right-wing beliefs or white supremacist affiliations? That's not that strange, okay? It's not that difficult to believe, right? I mean, there are plenty of different people with, first of all, psychotic inclinations. I mean, obviously, if you're going to go out and do a mass shooting like this, there's something not right with you up top, okay? But also, it's not that surprising, okay? You know how many Hispanics in the United States of America are right-wing or maybe like Trump supporters or even more far right-wing than that? I mean, it's not that extreme. same. Okay, do you know the history of fascism around the world? Believe it or not, many different populations around the world are susceptible to fascist belief systems. Okay, it doesn't have to be white people. It doesn't have to be any specific race or any specific, actual deterministic effects of who you are as a person, right? Anybody can have these political affiliations, right? But he apparently thinks it's either the weirdest story ever that we had a right-wing person go out and do a mass shooting, which is something that happens on like any given Tuesday here in the United States. It's apparently the weirdest story ever, or it's a psyop, in the words of Elon Musk. We also had some other misinformation that was going around, and this again was a perfect example of how conservatives will weaponize these moments to just try to confuse people and at least give them a little bit of doubt in terms of what the political leanings were about the shooter. Now keep in mind, these are the same people in the aftermath of that Nashville shooting at the Covenant Elementary School, okay, who were coming out when they found out that it was a potentially a trans person who committed that atrocity and said, look, this is representative of the entirety of the trans movement. They're violent. They're trying to attack Christians. This is a war against Christianity, right? Those same people now, when you have a white supremacist shooter, are coming out and trying to, use every excuse in the book that you could possibly find in order to shed doubt that there was any right-wing affiliations with this person. And they do this every single goddamn time. One other aspect of this, and then I'll finish off this video. They say here from BNO, a lot of misinformation continues to be shared about the Texas mall shooter's identity. The two incorrect photos are simply mugshots of people with the same name. Okay, so what happened here is right-wing accounts went out on these police websites and Google searched the name of the shooter and came up with some other people, some other Hispanic people who had, I guess, been arrested at some point and said, look, this guy over here, he has a weird neck tattoo, and so that can't possibly be the shooter because that contradicts with the Bellingcat reporting on some of his other tattoos where, or some of those other pictures where he didn't have a neck tattoo in that one. Okay, turns out it's just not the same guy. It's a completely different guy. And they were circulating these pictures online to insinuate that there was some sort of a psyop going on. Okay, so that's where we're at here in the United States of America. We just have mass shootings every single week, sometimes multiple times a week in this country, sometimes even in the same state, because there was another attack that wasn't a mass shooting, but some guy drove his car at a migrant bus stop, okay, at a migrant center in Texas and killed a bunch of people as well. Okay, these kinds of attacks are happening on a regular basis, but especially these mass shootings on a regular basis in this country. The only country in the face of the planet that has these kinds of things occur on this regular of a basis, okay? But this is a reality that we live in. This happens every single week, sometimes multiple times a week, and then we have these same exact responses every single goddamn time. Oh, it's the mental health. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. Oh, do you want to address mental health in this country? No, we don't actually want to address that in any serious capacity whatsoever. Then they say, oh, you're politicizing it. We shouldn't politicize these issues. Well, how do you expect that we're going to have conversations about how to remediate these issues if we don't have political conversations about policies that could potentially reduce the likelihood or the severity of these kinds of events in the future? And then we even now apparently are adding on another layer of that, where I guess this isn't new because we've seen this from people like Alex Jones with the Sandy Hook shooting and all of that stuff, but now we have people even like Elon Musk, okay, the wealthiest man on the face of the planet, who are joining in the chorus of these right-wing deranged freaks who are saying, oh, well, we can't know the political affiliation of this person. We can't know their motivation. We can't even know who the shooter was, and they're spinning themselves in circles and getting themselves confused about the actual details here when it seems like it's pretty goddamn clear. Okay, so again, at the end of the day, whether or not you agree with certain gun control measures, whether it's, waiting periods or background checks or red flag laws or banning high capacity magazines or banning assault weapons in this country, regardless of whether or not you agree or disagree with some of those policies, okay, the one factor that separates the United States of America from every other developed country on the face of the planet and why we have this amount of mass shootings and why they don't have this amount of mass shootings, it's not the mental health, it's not the video games, it's not the violence depicted in movies, okay? It is the guns.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying